everyone, it's Clarice, and last weekend I was able to participate in the CramAthon, which was actually my very first readathon that I ever participated in. If you don't know what the CramAthon is, it was a readathon created by Witty Novels. But last weekend, as I said, I was able to participate in it and I got a lot of reading done. So today, I'm going to be doing my wrap-up for the CramAthon. In the CramAthon, I was able to read one novel, one novella, one graphic novel, one book written in verse, one children's book, and one non-fiction book for a total of 6 books, which is more than I expected. I was just happy that I was able to complete my TBR and all the challenges for it, but I was actually able to even read an extra book. The first book I finished this CramAthon was a graphic novel, Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a graphic novel containing 5 short stories. I don't normally read horror, and I guess you could classify this as horror, so I was extra glad that I was able to read this during the readathon. It was a really quick read. Probably took me about 30 minutes. I don't actually have much else to say about it. I enjoyed each of the short stories. I wasn't like thoroughly creeped out or amazed by any of them, but I really liked it. It was cool, creepy, beautifully illustrated. I don't have much else to say. And I forgot to mention, by finishing this, I obviously was able to complete the challenge of reading a graphic novel. The next book I finished was So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, which is the 4th book in the Hitchhiker's Guide series by Douglas Adams. By finishing this novel, I was able to complete the Read a Hardcover Book challenge, as well as the Read 2 books in 1 day challenge. I've been reading the series a lot recently, and I feel like I've been saying just the same things over and over and over again because, I don't know, the series is just consistently inconsistent and fun and interesting and weird. The next book I read was the 3rd and final book that I read on the first day of the CramAthon, which is crazy because I read 3 books in 1 day. How did that happen? But that book is Perfect State, a novella by Brandon Sanderson. To complete the challenge of course, reading a novella. I knew nothing about this novella going into it. I just knew I had to read a novella for this challenge, and I love Brandon Sanderson. He's probably my favorite author, so I searched Brandon Sanderson novella and found this one. So I read it, and it was amazing. Honestly, I don't know how Brandon Sanderson does it. I'd rather not say anything about the plot of the story because I knew nothing. 0% of what the story was about, and I ended up loving it. But just to give you the bare bones of what the story is about, just know that it's sci-fi and it involves multiple worlds and a bit of a sort of virtual reality, computer-y background to these worlds. And I don't really want to say much else. But just know that Brandon Sanderson is a world-building genius. I don't know how in this, well, it was in an ebook, so there weren't actual pages, but it said that the page count was less than 80 pages. And I don't know how Brandon Sanderson was able to build such an intriguing and somewhat complex world in under 80 pages. I was already so sucked into this world and so into it and so convinced of this world. You know, a world is good when it feels real, and this felt real. The plot is also very engrossing and really interesting, and I felt that I somewhat got some sort of emotional attachment to the characters. It was such an interesting world that I would be more than willing to read a whole novel on this world. But at the same time, the story was told in such a way that by the end of it, I was satisfied. It was a complete story arc. I didn't feel by the end of it as if I were missing something, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind having more, if that makes sense. I was this close to giving it 5 stars on Goodreads, but it wasn't quite there, but 4.5. It was way better than I expected. Definitely the best novella I ever read. The day after that, Saturday, I was relatively busy, but I did manage to get 1 book read and finished. That book is The Little Prince. I will not try to pronounce the author's name. I mean, it's The Little Prince. How can I hate The Little Prince? I don't. I really enjoyed reading this. Obviously, I read it in 1 sitting. It made me feel like a child reading this. Obviously, the language is really simple, but at the same time, it made some really serious, legitimate points about life and growing up and things but it wrote it in a way that was just so innocent. I loved the illustrations too. I didn't feel like it was below me, like I was too old for this book. I don't think anyone can get old for this story, and I'm really glad I finally read it. And of course, this completed the challenge of reading a children's book. Sunday, I was able to finish reading my book written in verse for the challenge again, and that book is Identical by Ellen Hopkins. This was definitely my favorite book right after readathon. I didn't really know much going into this. I just knew it was about identical twins, and that's literally it. I don't think you need to know more. I really appreciated going into it that way and letting the story be the one explain everything to me. But just so you know, it deals with a lot of deeper issues, lots to do with like family life and growing up. And just so you're warned, it also deals with a lot of the more sensitive issues like sexual abuse and drugs and cutting. I don't actually want to go too into my thoughts on this book because I plan to film a whole review of it sometime soon, but it was amazing. At first, I had a bit of a hard time getting into it, and at first I was a bit confused. But by the end of it, I was just so mind blown and so emotionally attached to these characters that I couldn't give it any less than 5 stars. It was so much better than I expected it to be. This is probably the book that I expected the least from in this readathon, and it ended up being my favorite. Again, I'll go more in depth with my thoughts in my full review, but I think part of the reason that I enjoyed this book so much is because of the book that I was reading the same time as it, which was the book that I finished the readathon with on the Monday, and that book was Men Explain Things to Me by, I forget her name, Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. I read this basically alongside Identical by Ellen Hopkins, mainly because I'm really weak and some of the subject matter dealt with in Identical were a bit hard for me to read. I would read it and then I would have to move on to Men Explain Things to Me and kind of recover a bit for a while before I continued reading Identical. Weirdly, even though Men Explain Things to Me dealt with things like sexual assault again and rape and things like that, I felt more comfortable reading it kind of from an outsider's point of view rather than from the actual victim's point of view. Like in Identical, it just felt way too personal and it was really hard for me to deal with it. But that's also what made it such a good book. That being said, I think that reading these two books side by side really improved my experience reading both of them. It's like reading about real facts about these issues while reading this fictional story of a character dealing with them made it feel all the more real and helped me not question anything that was going on at all. But at the same time, reading it from a more personal perspective, even if it was fictional, really helped me kind of relate to the real issues being addressed or mentioned in this non-fiction book and made me again be able to relate to things that I wouldn't have been able to relate to otherwise. Just reading those both together again improved the experience for me so much and made me get more into the books than I would have otherwise. That being said, I gave Identical 5 out of 5 stars for sure. I gave Men Explain Things to Me 3 stars because while it was enlightening, it didn't really give me any mind-blowing realizations or anything. Yet I still feel like it's a really important subject matter to tackle, that even though it's much improved, there still exists a problem. And it emphasized a lot of the importance of not looking at rape and sexual abuse issues as isolated events and see it as a problem with our society and see it as a culture, this rape culture, you know. And I don't want to go too in depth of it because if you wanted that, you would read it. And even though I don't feel it gave me any completely new ideas, it did solidify and help me develop some of the existing ideas in my head on these topics. So those are the 6 books I read for this CramAthon. Because I was able to read 6 books, I was also able to complete the final challenge of reading 5 books for the CramAthon, which I'm so happy about. First readathon complete success. So did you participate in the CramAthon? How did you do? And what books did you read? I would love to hear about them in the comments. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!